So I'd like to invite our panelists up to the front. Chris Funk, who is the superintendent of Eastside Union High School District. Barry Groves, superintendent of Mountain View Los Altos High School District. Benjamin Picard, who's the superintendent of Sunnyvale School District. And then Lisa Wheeler from the California Teachers Association, and Jen Thomas, who's the president of the San Jose Teachers Association, and I'll invite Michael Hickey up. I guess you can appear twice, I guess, so do double duty. Okay, and Angelica has sort of presented some aggregate data on how the state is responding to the challenge of Common Core implementation, and we're lucky to have a number of distinguished educators here who will talk about how they are responding to those challenges in their district.
Thank you.
So I'm going to begin with Barry, because he's the one person that I know personally, so I can embarrass him first.
And the oldest.
And Barry, ask you just to lead off by talking about how Common Core, the implementation of Common Core state standards fits in strategically with the vision for the future in your district, and what have you emphasized as you've moved forward with Common Core?
Oh, great. My name is Barry Groves. I'm superintendent of the Mountain View Los Altos High School District. Our demographics are about 50% white, 25% Asian, 25% Latino. About 70-75% of our students go to four-year schools, 95% go to two-year schools or four-year schools. How does Common Core state standards strategically fit into our vision? Like many school districts, we have a strategic vision as a result of a strategic planning process that we did several years ago. So we're continuing to implement that strategic planning process. That's a 6-year process with goals. It fits very, very nicely into Common Core. One of the things that we did that makes my life much easier is that we have adopted as a district the state standards in every area. And as they change, we continue to adopt that state standards. So actually, we don't have to have those discussions on whether we're going to do this or whether we're going to adopt these standards, because de facto, all those state standards that are adopted are our standards as well. So that's been nice for us. So we've known that Common Core has been coming for some time. We knew that we were going to implement it, and so we've had long discussions about what we wanted to do. In addition, many of our teachers are members of state and national content area organizations. So they too have been implementing and talking about Common Core. So we have sent over 70% of our teachers out to either local, state, or national conferences or areas so that they can get more information. And that's happened over the last 2+ years. So there's a consensus about Common Core. As you heard Mike Kerr say, Common Core, at least in California, really doesn't have any major group detractors, which in my time of being an educator is rare. You know, people are not saying, I don't like these standards. Business groups are in favor, teachers' organizations, school boards, the state, everybody has come to consensus. So as a local implementer, it's made it much easier for us to have that as part of our district vision. In addition to Common Core, just know that high school districts have other things that are, I won't say equally, but certainly very important to us. Things like SAT scores, AP, courseware and exams, EL assessment results, and district-wide assessments and metrics. So for us, Common Core has just been a natural rollout. You know, we have issues that, we'll talk about later, but in terms of our strategic vision and what we're doing in terms of alignment, we did grade alignment last year. By the way, if you ever want to do grade alignment, please call me first. I will tell you there's a few issues with it. It's taken us a couple of years to do. Ensuring that all students learn and addressing the achievement gap and STEM education. So for us, Common Core has just been a natural, the kinds of things that we like We have been promoting in terms of instruction, in terms of cooperative learning, project-based education, collaborative learning, problem solving, and critical thinking. We like to think that that's the norm in the classroom, so those kinds of things lend them quite well to the things that we need in the CCSS.
And Chris Funk, you want to talk about what's going on in Eastside Union?
Thank you. Chris Funk, Superintendent for Eastside Union High School District. We are the largest high school district in Northern California and the fourth largest high school district in the state, serving 24,000 students at 11 comprehensive high schools. So what's been nice is that in my first year last year in the spring, we were going through the strategic planning process, and I actually completed 22 community engagements, 22 focus groups with teachers, students, and parents with over 3,000 individuals. And we were able to develop our new strategic plan and identify our vision, mission, core values, and then the key performance indicators that we plan on measuring our organization as a whole. And in that discussion, it was really what is the graduate profile that we're looking for from Eastside. And it's really around those 21st century skills that fit naturally with the Common Core. But we have a lot of work to do in terms of not only identifying those survival skills, 21st century skills, but actually developing the rubrics to measure the students by, and then providing not only our students, but our teachers multiple opportunities to demonstrate their proficiency around those, what we call the 5 C's. And that's really what the Common Core is all about. I think we have a large gap to overcome because I truly believe that the No Child Left Behind was a mentality of compliance, and it took the art of teaching away from our teachers. So I don't think it's going to be a natural change. I don't think it's going to be a 1-2 year implementation. I really think it's a transition to the Common Core, and the only way we're truly going to be able to measure the outcomes of the Common Core is 13 years from now, when a kindergarten goes through the system, to really see if the Common Core has had the impact that we want it to have. But I also believe that the Common Core is a natural time for us to shift into problem-based and project-based learning. It's a natural opportunity to support teachers in defining and supporting their art of teaching, but changing from the compliance mode and the rote memorization to the project-based, problem-based, student-structured learning, as well as our students changing the way they demonstrate their learning. Because I think that's going to be the biggest change in the Common Core, is how we assess our students and what we're going to ask them to do to demonstrate their learning. That was kind of a mouthful, so did I answer all the questions?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, of course, the strategies for Common Core implementation are great, but it's actually teachers who have to do the work. So, and in this meeting, we have teachers who represent different districts. So, Jen Thomas, I'll ask you to talk a little bit about what's going on in San Jose from a teacher's point of view.
Great, thank you so much. I really want to thank everybody for the opportunity to be here. Sometimes there are panels of very important, very intelligent, very powerful people that don't actually include kind of the rank and file. So it's a great opportunity to share with you what's going on kind of at the ground level. My name is Jen Thomas. I'm president of San Jose Teachers Association. And full disclosure, Mr. Funk gave me my first job. So while I agree with everything he says, it's just obviously he makes a lot of really good decisions. And
One in particular.
at least one.
Yes.
I actually do want to say that I really concur with what Chris was saying, and really appreciate hearing that from a leadership point of view. Mike Kirst talked a great deal about local responsibility, local initiatives, local empowerment, but he didn't really address local exhaustion. We talk about implementation of the Common Core like it is just a series of things we need to do to revamp technology, to focus again on collaborative learning and problem-based education. Oh, and by the way, there are no texts available, there are no books available, and after 15 years of No Child Left Behind, we've instructed, particularly in elementary, teachers to adhere with great fidelity to the text in order to close the achievement and opportunity gaps. If you were just on page 8 on day 12, children will learn better. And that's what we've told our teachers for a very long time. And now it's not only is there no page 8, but you need to revamp everything you're doing. And I think you see the significant differences between the teachers' understanding of the English standards versus the math standards. I mean, we are tearing up everything at the same time, and the real choke points are occurring in the classroom. The teachers fully embrace the Common Core, as far as I can tell. They are excited. People who are probably the most excited are what it means for next generation science standards and social studies teachers. They are so excited to finally be included in the conversations about literacy and proficiency and college readiness. They are champing at the bit, but we don't have any resources to give them. Now, I say that fully aware that my statewide union, the California Teachers Association, recently featured the San Jose Unified School District as one of the districts most poised to begin the transition to the Common Core. And it's great. We're doing really well. But I'm not saying that the standard is low for that readiness. It's just that there is so little out there in terms of a structured rollout, so little support in terms of knowing where we're going, because everything is new. And in public education, we as teachers, we don't necessarily function that way. We don't function our best that way. We like structure, because if we screw up, our accountability is sitting in front of us. 35 third graders, God help us, or 165 10th graders, we don't have time to be told this is a process. And so I think in the urgency to move to the Common Core, everybody feels it, but the great majority of the stress on the system lands in the classroom. And our system's capacity to help teachers cope with that, to really show support, to really be clear in the message that we are in this together, everybody take a deep breath, will determine how well we transition to the Common Core and how successful we are in the end. I think, if I may make one more comment, the fundamental disconnect that occurs to me, and with the best of intentions, was listening to Mr. Kirst talk about really the Common Core implementation is a 5-year rollout, but testing begins tomorrow, right? The constant message of this takes time, this is going to be difficult, but you will be tested, and we have lived in a culture where testing drives everything, regardless of the quality of the test. Really speaks to me to the paradox that is very difficult and very stressful for the public educators in California.
Now you can see why I hired Jen.
And why I invited her to the panel.
And I gave her an application.
They do pay better in Mountain View, I'm not going to lie.
Okay, so Michael Hickey from Santa Clara, would like to speak to this question?
Great, thank you, David, and I get to follow up Jen. That's my fortunate. So along the lines, I appreciate, my name is Michael Hickey, I'm the president of the United Teachers of Santa Clara. As Jen stated, I appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak with you all as well. I think along the lines of what we're very excited, as Chris Funk alluded to, the instructors and teachers are very excited about this transition to the Common Core. It does give us an opportunity to go back to the art of teaching. It is drastically different than the previous 10 years of failed policy of No Child Left Behind. Many teachers who develop their practice during that time are going to be at a loss for how to transition into this, and teachers who have more experience are going to be embracing this opportunity. Having said that, the amount of this opportunity, which I think everybody embraces, also demonstrates an incredible challenge. One element that I think is missing and is going to be continuing to be missing in this process is how are we going to allocate the resources to provide the teachers with the one thing that they do not ever have, which is time. Professional development is one thing that we're going to have to implement, but I know in the rush to transition to the Common Core, we're going to try to do the easy way. Let's have one whole school-wide or district-wide professional development opportunity for everybody to come to. And we don't do that with our students. We provide differentiated instruction for our students, recognizing where they're at. And how do we do that for professional development? It's an incredible challenge to see where teachers are, and everybody who's ever been educated knows that they've been in an experience where they've gone through a professional development that has been torture, because it doesn't apply to what you need to do in your classroom. So as we look towards the future, and as Michael Kirst demonstrated too in his description of it, is that this is not, there's a lot of anxiety among administrators and among teachers, among everybody, that we need to get to the finish line really quickly. How are we going to get there? And I'm glad to hear the president of the school board of the state talk about the importance of us looking at the long term. Where are we going to be in 4 years? Where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years? it's important for us to remember that this journey of what it is doesn't even, it's not, as there's the analogy that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but it's not even a marathon. There is no finish line. This is a journey of us to embrace an opportunity to really look at changing the way that we do instructional practice. So what are we going to do to give teachers the time, treat them as professionals, and embed within our school years the time to give them in order to develop in order to get into this brave new world of the Common Core. That's not something that's really talked about, and again, it goes back to the reality of we're still at 49th or 50th in per pupil spending. Is this a challenge that we can really embrace? Are we going to be able to give teachers the time to do this kind of work? Or are we just, as Jen really indicated, are we just going to say, here's the template and good luck? So really what I want to do is express that anxiety, share that anxiety with you that a lot of, and I know many administrators feel as well, but that the teachers feel, and what is the plan, what is the expectation in the coming year, and where are we going to look like in 5 years? How is this plan going to be implemented? Along the same lines that Jen alluded to as well is where is class size in this? I know that the state has been looking at the K-3 and bringing it down to 24, which is a good start, but what are we looking at the upper levels of reducing class size? And again, all this comes down to money, right? It's a compromise. Where are we going to get the resources from the state in order to really kind of do this implementation, or in our local districts? I guess the last thing that I really wanted to comment in regard to this is, as this happens, as we move into the Common Core, the best ideas can come from the top. They really can. But if the bottom doesn't embrace them and believe them, there will be no success. So the importance of having teachers involved in this process all along the way, not just teacher leaders, because we all know within our schools, within our districts, there are leaders in curriculum already there that we want to tap into, but we need to get involvement from all of the teachers, all of the educators across the board, not just the teachers, in order for them to feel like this is something that they're a part of, that they can embrace, because ultimately its success is dependent upon their commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa Wheeler from CTA, do you have something to add?
Just a couple of points. So my name is Lisa Wheeler, and I work for the California Teachers Association and have been out of the classroom now for about 11 years. And when the issue of Common Core began to get its momentum, and we recognized that it was real and was going to be systemic and was going to change the way we do what we do, the first thing I had to do was think about it from a teacher standpoint and think about it from the idea of who our experts would be. As was mentioned earlier, this is a brave new world. It may look a lot like No Child Left Behind, but in reality, it's so much more than that, right? It really is. And it has the accountability components to it that we didn't have prior to No Child Left Behind. And so I started thinking, so what does that mean? It means I need to understand it, right? I have to embody it. I have to get what Common Core means philosophically. Then I have to start playing with it with people who are passionate about it and do what I do. So I have to start building things and looking at what lessons look like, and then being able to see how it connects back to what the Common Core intentionality is. And then I have to work with it more. I have to be in my lessons, changing what I do, so that if I'm teaching as a high school English teacher something relative to poetry and Shakespeare, I now have to re-see that, look at it completely differently than I had in all of my training and all of my experience and all of my own rollout, so that in fact I'm incorporating the components of Common Core, and really that means teaching it differently than I've ever taught it before. And all of that is so time intensive, right? And when I, as was mentioned by Dr. Kirst in the very opening, he said something like, we have to do this from the top to the bottom. And Jen looked over at me and she said, that would be the teachers. Because that's the way it feels, right? We are the bottom. And yet, in reality, as everyone's mentioned, so you guys are playing with how do we create the vehicle? And then we're looking at how do the teachers actually implement the vehicle, get on it, drive it, make it work. And for us, the structures that we've had in place aren't sufficient, right? It is not okay to say, well, let's do a 5-day PD during the summertime. That'll do it. No, because yes, it may be a start. It may be a place, depending on where your readiness level is and what you've done so far, that might be the first, let's ignite it, let's roll it, let's move it, right? Differentiation, as Michael had. But everything you and we create in our schools has to now be focused on Common Core. So in the old days, when it was all about scripted learning and benchmark testing and reteaching, right? Now, that time has to be devoted to teachers being able to get together and play with what they're doing and modifying it and watching somebody else do it because I didn't get it and seeing how to adapt that and then being able to talk to my colleagues about, so this is what I was thinking, does this work, right? That opportunity to change how we do what we do in schools, 17 years of teaching, the old rule about you close the door and you teach, and if you're a good teacher, people know it, and kids do okay, that reality hasn't been in existence for a very long time, and one of the good things that came out of, if there can be something, out of the NCLB chasing the test piece, is that we always were looking at kids and learning, and so we have to pull that component into this and constantly be using all of our time, every chance we get, to collaborate with one another and work on the craft. It's got to be that, or Common Core is not going to, I don't think, have the impact it potentially has. And then the conversation we'll be having at the next conference is, so why aren't we achieving under Common Core? Because that's coming. And so that brings me to the second point that hasn't been mentioned, and maybe it's going to be in someplace else, and that is, I know that 15 years of potentially teachers who have never taught anything differently, right? Scripted learning, page 8, as Jen mentioned. For them, this is a reteaching of how to teach. I also think they're going to, if they haven't already, they're going to be thrilled by that opportunity to actually be what they got into teaching to be, that is passionate and artistic and driven and focused on kid learning. So all of that I'm not worried about. But I know that because the test is tomorrow, right? Because we already have, what do we have? 15 possible tests that are out there that I could take right now and implement in my classroom. Starting next year, there are going to be 4 practice tests that can be implemented. That teachers for the last however long have learned that the way you verify if what you're doing is right is by checking the test, are going to be walking into Common Core with one foot in the door that says, how does the test, what does the test look like? And for us as a community of educators, the ability for us to say, we don't know how that alignment is going to work, but we have to be committed to the Common Core no matter what, and then allow the testing component to actually catch up with that as opposed to drive the instruction because of the test. Because our teachers are almost, it's almost in our DNA to do it the other way, to look at the test and figure out that's what I need to teach. That's not what Common Core is about. It doesn't work that way, and it won't work if that's our focus. So those were the 2 points.
Both great points, and thanks to all of you. I think you've opened up a lot of interesting questions. So I'm going to start with money. I mean, we talked about money, we talked about time. We'll get to some of the other issues as well. But the state provided a special categorical fund this year for Common Core implementation. And Chris, maybe I'll start with you. How did you all decide how to use that money, and what investments did you make with it?
So we basically did what everyone else did. You have the 3 boxes and decided, how am I going to break this up, right? Around instructional materials, technology, and professional development. We went more heavy on the instructional materials and the technology first, simply because we also have Title IIA money. So there is professional development money that you can add on top of the Common Core money. But we're going to adjust because I'm hoping that we're going to put an EdTech bond on the ballot in November, and that will take care of the technology issues, which will then fund more money into instructional materials and or professional development. So we're also tying our LCAP monies for each side. It's about, at this point, $5.2 million more for our subgroups. And we're going to install what we started in St. Albans Unified, and that's instructional coaches, because I believe if you do not have that reflective partner supporting your art of teaching on an ongoing, regular basis, not just a one-day staff development day or even a 5-day summer training, which we're going to do also, you have to have that ongoing training and conversation. And so we're using LCAP money to install instructional coach at every single school, and then we're going to double that with our Common Core money, which is the soft money for 2 years, but we're anticipating the state to be smart and at least add one more funding cycle, which would carry us another 2 years out.
Barry?
Yeah, thank you. Again, the three little pots that you have, professional development, technology, and materials, there's not enough money there to start on implementing. There is not enough if that is all you're using. So you have to look at many of your other budgets to be able to implement if you hope to be at all at least keeping up with the curve. Our big area is in professional development, like Chris. Things that we've been able to do recently is hire instructional coaches or content area specialists who are working with our staff to implement Common Core. As I mentioned, we have a curriculum institute, and that is for Common Core funding. So not only does it fund teachers' ability to go to local, national conferences, but it also allows them to buy time. And we focus on course teams like English World Lit teams, science bio teams, and giving them time either during the day, compensated after school, compensated during the summer, or compensated on weekends. One of the other things that we're in the process of doing, union people, hold your head, we're looking at lengthening the school year, is negotiating a longer school year to give teachers more chance. Not necessarily just in the summer, but maybe breaking up the school year and having additional days during the school year, because you saw the survey results that time is our biggest issue. And for us, it's time is the biggest issue. We've also found that, just as a side note, for us, the kind of time that is most valuable for our teachers is not district-wide implementation or even school-wide implementation, but it's really course team implementation. The time for teachers to get in the weeds, unpack. What does it mean to be a freshman English teacher? What are we going to do? So specific to that specific course, to that specific area. So we're trying to find ways to get more money for that. Obviously, for technology, that's not even possible in the money that they've given you, although I know many districts who are just trying to get the technology just to be able to do the testing. Not to implement teaching as a tool with technology, but just for the testing, because most of our colleagues don't even have that technology. So we're very fortunate to be able to do that. Materials. We've actually put off materials. We've looked for appropriate things. We're finding that some of the best materials are actually being implemented in other states. There are other states that are ahead of California. So we're looking to those states for supplemental materials to try to use those. But to go ahead now and do a major adoption is not something we want to do because we don't know what we need yet.
So Jen, you want to talk a little bit about
sure.
how things are going in San
I'm sure my superintendent's spending our money very soundly, and everything's going to be fine. So we have a section of our contract that guarantees consultancy in issues of new curricular rollouts or major changes to state requirements. So a good chunk of that money has been spent on technology upgrades for the testing, which I assure you most teachers don't know what the testing is. Lisa talked about 4 sample tests next year. I'm going to go back and tell everybody. But it's just this mystery thing that's happening, right? But our district has spent a great deal of money on professional development as well, releasing teachers during the day to collaborate, to work together, bringing cohorts of teachers in who are then expected to be dispatched back to their sites and then do that training with them. It's just, there's enough money. There's enough money. There's just not enough time. It's insane. You look at some of our elementary school teachers especially have been taking taken the brunt of this responsibility, this collaboration to share with their teachers, and their eyes are kind of glazed over. It's almost like you can see that they're just full. All the neural circuits they're just done. There's just little buzzing, and they're just doing their best to make it work. So if I can offer you one piece of unsolicited advice, if you have the opportunity to refrain from engaging in the message with your teachers that we've spent a lot of money on this, so please go out and make it happen. On behalf of the at least 1,713 teachers, counselors, nurses I know, we'd really appreciate it. We know it's expensive. We know we're expensive. We're doing the best we can, and just try to keep supporting us like you have in that journey. But I think there's a ton of frustration about how much money is going to be spent versus how quickly things are going to change. So any awareness you bring to that conversation is really appreciated.
Lisa or Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. I think we definitely have a concern about how the decision-making is being made and how to allocate these monies for technology, instructional materials, or for professional development. I think we really are not, I haven't seen a whole lot of press going on in the Bay Area of taking advantage of where we should be getting technology from. We have all these wonderful companies that are in the Silicon Valley. Why on earth we should be spending this money on technology instead of marching in unison into Apple and into Cisco and into all these companies and saying, you have an opportunity to have your label in all of our schools. And not to mention the fact as well, lots of people, I'm a K-3 teacher in my experience and taught adult English as a second language as well. But I know in the new standards that keyboarding is going to become a requirement for kindergartners. Are kindergartners going to be keyboarding in 5 years? Are we really thinking about whether that's a good option right now? And my fear is that lots of people are going to jump. Again, they're anxious and they're concerned and saying, oh my gosh, we have to do this, so let's get every kindergarten a keyboard right now. Well, that's not necessarily a smart choice to make when we're looking at technology. So more importantly, we need to be methodic in the choices that we make. And again, I'll go back to what I said before. Let's not be anxious and make decisions too rashly, too quickly, in the concern that, we have to spend this money within 2 years, and so let's buy a bunch of computers or buy a bunch of iPads, instead of looking at the long-term needs of within our schools. And if I was going to go back to what I'd said before in regards to where the focus should be on the money, I'm thrilled to hear Barry, right? Describe the idea that we need to start looking at teachers as professionals. It's just as lawyers and doctors and these other professions are. Doctors are not told the entire hospital is going to go to one professional development, and here it is. They go to their superiors, or lawyers do, and they say, wow, I found out about this great conference. I really think it's going to help me in my profession, and then it's paid for. We need to really start treating teachers in that way professionally and allowing them to come up with opportunities that are going to help them in their practice and in their profession, and encourage those kind of elements. As also was mentioned, it's not nearly enough money, right? But the idea that we would spend a majority of the money on technology is of great concern to me. I would overwhelmingly advocate for professional development to be used. And although I had my ears open when Barry described extending the school year, honestly, I think for a lot of teachers that's a possibility. It's something that they understand. Not necessarily extending the school year for instructional days, but in our district, for example, we have 4 professional development days in the year right now. That's not nearly enough. If we look at examples that we're supposed to, that are supposed to be models throughout the world, if you look at Finland or you look at Japan, they have days embedded in the calendar where there are no kids, where there are no students, where teachers are given the opportunity to collaborate all day long and reflect on their lessons. We need to start looking at those kind of models. Again, what does this all mean? It's money. And again, it's unfortunately a situation where the state, and more so, of course, the federal government has lots of mandates but doesn't provide the funding. And so, in regards to getting back to the point of how we're going to spend this money, I would recommend that it be spent on professional development. I would recommend that opportunities be given to utilize this specifically for professional development and not do overwhelmingly on technology. I know that the teachers in our school district are definitely looking forward to the opportunity to have meaningful professional development to help them with this transition to the Common Core.
Just a couple really quick points. One is, as Jen put it, unsolicited advice, just a thought for you to consider. And that is, please don't rush out to go buy a package from some expert that's selling it, because every educational reform immediately is followed by cottage industries that make lots of money telling you how to do what it is that no one is yet doing, right? I don't, I honestly think that that's not a good use of your funding. I know as a CTA staff person, I also am the representative for the County Office of Education. And I was here just a few days ago, last week, and there was a presentation in this room by the textbook people. You imagine that they're a little worried about what Common Core means to their bottom line because we aren't going to have rollouts of textbooks every 2 years, every 3 years, mandated. That's not going to be. So they're having to evolve. And believe me, they are hoping you're going to spend your money on them. And so I would just caution you not to spend it on people who are telling you that they are already experts at something that we are all defining now with recognition that there may be other states that are ahead of us in this process. Let's take everything we can from them. And then the aspect of the computers, we know what it means to live here and how quickly the technology, as soon as I bought my iPhone, it was obsolete. The next one, I got it weeks later. It was already getting changed, right? We know that right now, if we spend our money on whatever we think is going to allow us access to the tests and to the kids and all that stuff, that in 3 years, when this matters, those are not going to be the premier appropriate platforms to actually take those tests on. And so I think you're hearing at least some consensus about the idea that the real implementation here is on the ground in the work that the adults have to do. And so let's put the money there while that is our emphasis.
Chris?
So I do need to do a quick follow-up because what is amazing to me is that, yes, us adults here in our room, in this room here, we have our iPhones out, you have your iPads, your laptops, what have you. Your teachers do the same thing. But what happens in the classroom, and in my short time, in 1.5 years, I visited 1,000 classrooms already on the east side. Do you see technology being used in the classroom? Very rarely. As soon as the students walk out of the classroom, boom, they got their smartphones out. So there has to be an emphasis on how to use technology as a tool in your instruction. So there has to be an emphasis on technology in the classroom. It's not about preparing kids for the test. And people that know me well know that I've preached that I'm not a supporter of the CSTs, I'm not a supporter of the API, but I am a supporter of creative teaching in the classroom. And because of No Child Left Behind, because we're preparing kids for test prepping, there is absolutely no creativity in many of our classrooms, and there's absolutely no technology being used in the majority of our classrooms. So if we don't find that right balance, then that's going to be a critical piece that we're going to miss in the implementation transition to the Common Core. The final piece on this is that I agree that the Common Core is a great movement that's being transitioned to, and it's tailored on the international model, right? But the problem is we're not providing the opportunity for our teachers to teach the way it's taught internationally. Because when you look at Singapore, they spend less than 50% of their time with students. They're actually spending time with their colleagues developing the art of teaching and improving the content knowledge, right? So it is a factor in terms of moving forward and being successful with the transition to Common Core. Teachers cannot continue at the same pace, having 165 students in the classroom for 55-minute periods, 6 periods a day, and be successful with the transition to the Common Core. So I concur on some points, but we have an instructional crisis going on out there, and it's been caused by the No Child Left Behind. And if we do not provide teachers the opportunity to develop their art of teaching, to improve their content knowledge, and to infuse technology in the curriculum, we're not going to see any change whatsoever.
So I'm going to raise a different question. Lisa, I'll start with you. Both the Common Core categorical and the local control funding formula require consultation, communication with teachers as one constituency, but with the broader community as well. And from your regional perspective, how are you seeing that unfold in local school districts?
Well, I think you could actually ask all of these folks. probably your reality is exactly what we're experiencing. So the law was very intentional, particularly around LCAP, about the consultation with the bargaining unit as one of the stakeholders specifically that needs to be included in the plan. Common Core had similar language that basically said, we consult on that process. Now, how you consult with your bargaining units probably has something to do with your history and whether you have any contractual language that kind of sets out a process, or whether you just have relationships that exist between you and the leadership of the association in that manner. You can tell from my two colleagues here that philosophically, I think we believe that we not only have something to add as the leadership of the association, because I will just say this, I think it's probably true for many of you in this room that the leadership of the association are not who you think of when you think of who are the people championing kids. You don't have that connection. Now, we would argue with you about that, and I think you might see that these two people sitting next to me live that every single day, that everything they talk about in their association is tied directly to the concept of how does this serve kids and promote public education, right? Now, that may not be your reality. So probably in this room, the whole spectrum exists around, yes, we've been talking about LCAP and Common Core since the day it was adopted, and we are still figuring out what that looks like, but the association is in that conversation all the way to, well, they got an invitation to the forum, right? That's not consultation in my mind. And I would say to you that I would request consideration that, in fact, you have a conversation that's pointed and specific with the association leadership on Common Core, and then see where that fits into all the other forums that you put in place. I know that well, I'll let Michael talk about his intention relative to making sure that his teachers, his teacher leaders, leadership in his association are engaged in every opportunity that the district puts in place for consultation both on LCAP and Common Core. But as I said, I would request that you consider having the pointed, specific conversations ongoing, set a calendar for it around these things, and then bring in what you learned last time, because the association should be doing the same thing. They ought to be taking what the last conversation was that you had in the room back out to their association members at their meetings, getting information about it, pulling it back in and bringing it back to you in that next opportunity. And what I can say to you, I'm glad that you brought up the issue about LCAP, because I know that one of my superintendents, Eric Andrews, said to me, God, I hope we talk about LCAP today. And the fact is, I'm finding that with most of the school districts, Common Core, we're all in this boat. We feel like we're all in the same boat together, right? But LCAP feels a little different. It's not quite as clear, because that's really about how do you put dollars behind agreements you believe really are going to move target kids forward in a way that never has before. A different way of budgeting, a different way of organizing the way administration deploys services as well as support. That's a different environment than Common Core is. And so I would say do it pointed purposefully. And what I've told my chapter leaders, because I meet with all of the presidents from the county, is, depending on what your relationship is with you guys, walk into the room and say, okay, so let's sit down and talk about LCAP. Now, what are you putting in place and how can we participate in that? Maybe even how can we help in that? Because my sense is that, as was mentioned earlier in multiple places, LCAP lined up with Common Core under LCFF really drives an agenda that is so student-centered and so focused on making what we do in the classroom effective and efficient for all kids that it's hard to get outside of that conversation if that's what all the people in the room agree is the agenda. And so that's a great way to have a conversation with the association.
So, Barry, I'll come to you. The association is clearly one of the partners here, but the the number of stakeholders that are identified in the LCAP framework is a lot larger than that. How do you work with those other constituencies?
So one of the things about LCAP and the Common Core is it's obviously focused on the local level. It's one of the few things since I've been in education that they've basically said, I mean, the Common Core is not something you implement. It is a goal. It is a standard. It's not the curriculum. It is not the additional assessments. It's not allocating funds. So that now has gone from the state level to the local level. So it puts a burden on the local level then to engage your community. Also, all our communities are different, even in Santa Clara County. I think Lyndon Johnson said, all politics is local. And if you don't believe education is politics, then come to a school board meeting, particularly in Kristin's district. No, his district is fine.
Come on now.
Yeah, I know, we love that.
There's been a nice transition the last 2 years.
So how do you engage your community? So how I engage my community might be different than how a rural school district or a large urban school district, but it's important that you engage your community and what your community wants. So for us, one of the issues is our community is very strong and that they want to have education that will provide their students to be able to go into a first choice college. That is a high priority. So whatever we're doing, we have to keep that in mind. So when we're talking about Common Core, things that come up for our district that may not come up for a lot of your district. For example, private schools are not using Common Core. They are not adopting Common Core in our area that I'm aware of. So they ask, why are you doing Common Core? They are not. They're getting their kids into college. How is this going to help or hurt our kids? So we have to educate our community on why we're doing Common Core, how this is going to help their kids. Also, if you change the names of your courses from a traditional name to integrated name, how is that going to play in your community? I will tell you that there are people in here who are having those discussions currently about the changing of the name and what it means to their community. So LCAP for us, because we're a basic aid school district, is a little bit different than the others, but these other larger issues about how is this going to change the status quo for our kids. Yes, I mean, there are so many of us who need to improve our achievement gap. We need to get internationally competitive. Yes, those are issues, but they're also issues of part of our community of how is this going to change? How might this disadvantage our kids who are competing against private schools, who have in the past gone through this sequence of classes and been very successful? Why are you talking about changing that or changing what you're doing? So there's another part of our community that we're trying to engage and bring along. And for us, my community won't hear this, sort of maintaining or dealing with the possible hysteria around this change, whenever there's a change in education, and to manage that. So for us, one of the big things that we're doing is rolling it out and saying this is a multiple year process. There will be changes in terms of material, assessment, and instruction. However, the result for your children will continue to be providing an excellent background for you to move on to the next level.
Okay. One last question, and Chris, I'll start with you. What challenges have you faced? I mean, we can talk about strategies, we can talk about visions, we can talk about plans, but what kinds of pushback, what kinds of obstacles have you encountered as you've begun to work on this?
So with the implementation of the Common Core, one of the key supports is the fact that we have established what's called the Eastside Alliance. And the Eastside Alliance is the high school district along with the 7 feeder districts that make up 7 feeder districts, which is Evergreen, Oak Grove, Franklin McKinley, Alum Rock, Mount Pleasant, Orchard, Berryessa, thank you. When you look at it as a system, that's 86,000 students. We'd be the third largest school district in the state of California. We'd be larger than Oakland and San Francisco combined. And so we are working together on the implementation of the Common Core. And our focus is 6th through 11th grade math, and K-1 is our implementation plan for next year. So the challenge for us is that in our feeder districts, it's that acceleration, because with the traditional sequence, parents have been pushing algebra by 8th grade, geometry by 8th grade. So what does that mean with the Common Core and with the high school district? Because we're moving to the integrated route. It makes the most sense to us. K-8 is integrated. Internationally, the countries that are performing better than us are integrated. And we wanted to make sure teachers made that shift, because if you simply implement the traditional algebra, geometry, algebra 2 sequence to the new Common Core, you have to adjust the standards that are being taught. And I'm afraid that many teachers that are veteran teachers that are 5 to 8 years from retiring are not going to necessarily make that shift. With integrated, you're spiraling the content and the standards all 3 years. I think that's going to benefit students. So we have to do a much better job, and we're working together as an alliance on that articulation. What is the pathway? What if a current student is in 8th grade and they're taking algebra? What will they take as a 9th grader? If they're currently in geometry in 8th grade, what will they take in 9th grade? So we've had to map that out and communicate that we're just doing a 1 year at a time implementation, and course 1 starts next year, course 2 the following year. And if they're in the traditional sequence, they will remain in the traditional sequence until the full implementation.
So we're coming up on a break, but Jen and Michael, do you have anything that you would, or you didn't get a chance to say that you would like to make sure gets said?
I think I hammered enough on the issues on the teacher side for implementation of the Common Core, just the complexity, the timing, the stress, the lack of resources, the lack of internal structures in districts which have had to cut their professional development funding and capacity for years to account for the $20 billion in cuts to public education. Those are not insignificant hurdles to come back from, and it's very difficult to build an internal structure to support a vision for ongoing professional development, as well as rolling out new standards and mysterious testing with internet.
I would just say that the opportunity in regards to construction of the LCAP and the importance of having the stakeholders involved. A majority of the board in our district is very focused on making sure that the taxpayers of the area who don't have any kids in the schools are at the table, that they have an opportunity to give their input. And I think that I'm not disagreeing that that's not important to have all the stakeholders involved, including those who don't have kids in the schools. But when you think about who has the expertise and the experience to best know how to allocate resources to improve student achievement, it's going to be teachers in the classroom. So the importance goes back to what I said earlier about the importance of having them involved in this process and making decision-making about how we allocate funds to best meet students' needs is pivotal. There's a lot of examples when you think about the change for the class size, for example, unlike before where class size was an average, I believe, at the school site. Now it's really on the district. So you can be really creative in the sense of how you allocate resources to meet the needs of second language learners and socioeconomic disadvantaged students. What is the local control funding formula really about? It's about demonstrating the fact that resources need to be allocated to the most need. And teachers know where the most need is and recognize that that's what they want to do, is to improve student achievement and close that gap. So I think having them at the table in the development of this plan is the best way for it to be successful in being able to realize the goal from the state, which is to help those students who don't have those opportunities in other schools. So hypothetically, you could have a situation where a school with high socioeconomic disadvantaged students and second language learners has a lower class size in K-3 than the school that doesn't. And people should embrace that opportunity to say, we're going to allocate resources to where the most need is.
Okay, we do have time for a couple of questions. Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, would you mind going over to the mic there?
Hi, is this working?
No.
Not one. on. Okay, it's working now? No?
No, we can hear you. It is not working.
Okay. I'll just speak loudly. My name's Erwin Morton. I'm not a superintendent. I'm here as a parent. I'm the Vice President for Education for PTA for this county and 3 other counties. So we are looking, and we are very focused on things like LCAP and making sure that the parent community is involved in a very detailed way. But I also wanted to ask about something that hasn't been mentioned yet, and that is early childhood education, which, as I understand it, will make a big difference in the job that we have to do later on. It will make life much easier. It has a 7-to-1 return, supposedly, on investment. Is there anything here that at least creates a path toward improving that? I know there's some stuff going on in the legislature, but how does it look from the school district and the teachers association level?
It's an allowable expense with the local control funding.
Right, and I'm a high school district, so I could speak to regarding the educare system in place that a partnership we have with the County Office of Education, Eastside Union High School District, and Franklin McKinley School District with First Five and the Packard Foundation. And we supported this project because it's a pipeline for our students directly into Andrew Hill and YB. But in terms of having full programs, it's not a dialogue that I've had with my people.
Obviously, there's also a discussion, not only do we have kindergarten who's being implemented now, but there's a proposal in the legislatures that's gaining some traction to implement preschool and have school districts implement it. There are some obviously implications for school districts. Do they have space? Do they have additional funding that's going to come with it? So I know my colleagues are interested in those.
Well, I think the issues are largely logistical and operational, right? The conversations are all very high level, and then we just try to figure out where to squeeze in the 3-year-olds near the bathroom, by the office. So we want to expand ECE because, like you said, it definitely has a huge benefit to students in the TK-12 education. We just don't know how yet.
Ellen, you want to?
We're going to need more plumbing.
Tiny This is working?
No.
Okay, so I'll just speak loudly. I'm on the school board in Mountain View Westman School District. Our district funnels into Barry Rose's district and Mountain View Southwood School District. And I'm a graduated parent of a child who got into a first choice college from that district. And I would like to second and then also ask the perspective of the panelists. Parents are very interested and worried about how these changes are going to result in their children getting into first choice colleges. So I have heard a little bit of talk about how the college board and some of the colleges are going to be taking these changes into account, but I don't think that message has gotten out there into the broader community, so there's a lot of worry in the parent community about different implementations of Common Core, like integrated math versus traditionally named math. How are those changes going to impact whether my child gets into a first choice college?
Yeah, I believe the new president of the College Board came from an organization that supported the Common Core. So he has a Common Core background, and he's talked about integrating the Common Core into the SAT and the SAT2. It's not going to be as aggressive as he first thought, but it's going to be there. The AP exam is very Common Core compliant, in my opinion. The kinds of assessments that you're required in AP, which are those final capstone classes that you have in high school, are very Common Core-like. So I think that those two things, those two assessments are very important to students, are very positive, and they are going to be adapting to the Common Core. The ACT also is putting a big push into a Common Core. In fact, the ACT has a new assessment that's going to be grades 2 through 11 that is Common Core-like, and eventually their ACT will be. So it's really nice to be in a place where all those assessments are going to be somewhat aligned and more aligned over time.
And the UC system has already accepted the integrated math sequence, 1, 2, and 3. And the reality, when you're talking first choice, particularly in Los Altos, Algebra 2 or Course 3 is meaningless. It's calculus, right? So once you take your calculus class, it doesn't matter the previous math courses you took. Did you pass calculus with an A or B to get to your first choice? That's all that matters. So parents should not worry about whether it's integrated or it's traditional sequence.
And I think the Common Core is much more about how students learn than what they learn. Core knowledge is not significantly different, right? Geometry is still geometry, literature is still literature. It's about the collaborative aspect of it and the way that the components are restructured so they fit more the developmental capacity of the students. So I think parents should actually think that this will drive more students to be prepared for college level work because it requires so much more critical thinking than the traditional kind of teaching and learning, which can be assessed by bubble tests.
And I think we have to acknowledge that there is going to be a phase-in process. I mean, Chris mentioned that probably his greatest challenge is acceleration. And I know that I've got a 5th grade son in San Jose Unified, and we're looking at the middle school model for what kind of math he's going to have available to him that will then allow him to be in a position like your son was or daughter was. And it's a little bit gray right now. And so I know the system is working hard to figure out how to make that work, and I suspect we'll come up with all those answers because the very first thing I heard as feedback about Common Core, this is bizarre, was from a parent who said to me, I'm immediately seeing that my daughter's class is less rigorous as soon as they move to Common Core. Now, what she meant by that after I probed wasn't really that it was less rigorous. From her standpoint, it didn't get to what she recognized as the elements of what you have to learn in order to move to the next, because her kid is a college prep kid and is going to move on that path and is going to be an AP student, is already in AP classes. And so the shift wasn't clear to her. How does it connect? What does it mean? And so the communication that's going to need to occur, you saw that in the slides earlier, particularly with parents who are hyper-focused on making sure that their son or daughter is still going to have access to all the things that you hope and dream for them, and are articulate about that and come to school board meetings and want to know, it's going to be an interesting thing for us.
One last question.
I'm Jesus Contreras, and the Common Core is focused on college and career readiness. And since pre-NCLB, when we were doing the second to none, and it was heavy focus on careers, there have not been really a career focus that has been statewide. So how do you envision the implementation under Common Core of college, which is, we have a lot of experience on, but career readiness from all the different perspectives of the administration and the teachers and the relationships? What challenges, what do we need to work on?
You want to start?
Sure. At our board meeting, Monday night, we had, as those of you may not know, this is College and Career Technology Month. And as part of that, you probably didn't know.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know. Actually, I didn't know until Monday either, but I know now. Anyway, so we focus on our career technical education programs. So we have career pathways and things like engineering, health sciences, biotechnology, and I think that those things fit nicely into Common Core. And so I think, if nothing else, we're looking at ways to expand that. So I don't see any issues with working with Common Core and career technical education, at least from our perspective. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to enhance that. One of the problems, however, is the funding model. So the funding for ROP, COPs is in flux, and we won't know until a year what happens with those dollars.
But the other piece of the Common Core is just the concept of the critical thinking, collaboration, communication across different platforms, and how do you measure creativity? And that's really what the Common Core is going to provide the opportunity for teachers to get back to that type of teaching. And then the key for me is around the demonstration of learning by students. And that, I think, is going to be the biggest hurdle for all to overcome, not only for teachers to adjust their teaching and that end result in terms of how they're going to assess, but giving students and teachers opportunities over the course of their 4 years in high school to demonstrate those proficiencies in those survival skills or 21st century skills, soft skills, career-ready skills, however we want to define them. Because prior to Common Core, as Barry mentioned, we already have a lot of those academies and pathways established, and we want to continue to bolster those, but it's what's happening in the regular classroom on a daily basis around those 5 C's or 4 C's, however any district defines their 21st century skills.
Okay, having said the last question, I'll take one more question.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the entree. I just felt compelled. My name is Marianne Carpan, and I am the director of Silicon Valley Career Technical Education, and it was CCOC, if you're familiar with Central County Occupational Center. It is the largest and the only one of its kind in Northern California with a campus. It's a CTE campus that makes it unique, 28 courses, etc. But experience with ROP classes throughout the state. I just wanted to mention, thank you, it is National Career Technical Education Month, that's February, and in talking with our partner districts, wanted to make sure that they remember that and asked at a recent meeting how they celebrated that, so, and we help with that. I sit there itching because, and our partners know that ROPs were not funded for Common Core. And yet CTE was the third group of teachers. It was ELA, it was math, CTE, then went to science and social studies because the state recognized CTE teachers' role in project-based learning, application of learning, the problem solving, the critical thinking. Those things go on every single day. And the kids might not pass Algebra 1 at their high school, they're doing Algebra 2 up on the beam in their construction class, or they're doing Ohm's Law in electronics. They just don't know that they know that higher math. But I just wanted to remind you or tell you if you didn't know that ROPs were not funded for Common Core. Our teachers need professional development. They need the support. We need the technology because the assessment, it's not just about the test, but as they're learning to assess differently, they need that technology as well. So, our partners have received funding, which we're thrilled about, and they've said not enough, and I would agree. But if you are working with ROPs and you do have those trainings and those kinds of things, just understanding that the ROPs weren't funded and to include those teachers when you can. And also, the tables turn a bit because CTE teachers have been doing project-based learning. They've been doing that for so long that though they've been under the gun to raise their academics and that rigor, the teachers, the English, social studies, etc., are under the gun to develop projects and deliver their curriculum differently. So just thank you for the entree with ROPs and with career technical education.
Okay, well, thank you, and I'd like to thank our panel. A round of applause.